Welcome to the second Lunch at the Circle podcast. I'm Per Karlsson. Peter Gumbel, a senior writer and journalist at Time magazine, author of the book French Vertigo, which deals with la nausée in France, you might say. Welcome.
Thank you.
Since you're from Time magazine, we thought we'd do 10 questions with you.
Okay.
As you always have in Time magazine.
Right.
So starting with the first on your book.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because I was very fed up with the debate in France about the future. My sense was that there was this tremendous pessimism and this sense that France had lost. And coming here for the second time, working here for the second time, my sense was very much the opposite, which is that this is a tremendous country with enormous possibilities, and it's in a sort of state of shock and denial, and it needs to get out of that, but it has a great future. So this is my way of saying, get your feet back together again, and stop turning around in the wind.
So in your book, you talk about the four principles. In just a couple of words, which are the four principles that you see?
The most important one is the first one, which is open the window. Because my sense is that the debate here is very stuffy, and that people are very focused on talking to each other and getting themselves into this sort of sense of decline and doom. And if you open the window and look out of the window, you'll see that, first of all, it's possible to change, and secondly, that others from Sweden to Austria to Canada have changed, and so there are solutions. And so the important thing is to change the debate. That's the first and most important. Secondly, I say turn off the taps, because the government loves to spend money. Thirdly, I say, very importantly, learn to get people to embrace change. One of the most important problems for politicians in this country is getting anybody to do anything differently. Because nobody really understands why they should. And what isn't done very much here, unlike in many other countries I've worked, is the sense of teaching and explaining and mobilizing people to want to change. And then the final one is about risk, because risk in this country is equated with danger, precariousness, and it isn't. I mean, it's just not that the case. Risk is really important for the future of any society. And if France could embrace risk, that would make a huge difference.
So are you an optimist or a pessimist
for
France?
Well, I'm an optimist, a nervous optimist.
Okay. In your book, you almost don't say one word about education and the young generation in France. Why is that?
Well, it's an enormously important topic, and it's an enormous problem. But I was trying to really restrict what I was writing about to a few simple principles and not offer prescriptions for every single problem on the table. Clearly, education is tremendously important. The system here is good, but it's not very well adapted to the job market. And most seriously of all, it leaves behind millions of very bright and ambitious people who then struggle. So yes, it's important, and yes, it's a fair point to come back to me. Perhaps I should have made more of it in the book, but I didn't want to say this is how you should do education, this is how you should do health. It was much more the bigger overarching principles.
Okay. You spent some time in California as a director of a US technology media company. If you were a CEO of an American technology company today, would you establish your European bridgehead, the first presence in Europe, in France?
Probably not. The conditions are good, the talent is here, but there is, first of all, I think the atmosphere in this country, the attitude towards risk that I was talking about, is not sufficiently positive. And secondly, there's so many other places which are doing very well and where you're welcomed with open arms, like Ireland or the UK or Scandinavia. And here, you arrive and they look at you suspiciously, and that would make me want to probably go somewhere else.
Okay. Your book, French Vertigo, is very political in some way. It's a political book. Have you had any reactions from politicians, good or bad?
Yes, I've had an enormous reaction, actually. One of the big surprises has been that, first of all, it's got attention, and secondly, that the reaction has been, for the most part, quite positive. I think it's because, for two reasons. First of all, I say that I actually love France. I want these proposals are not made in any way to say, look how terrible you are, France. It's much more to say, look how great you are and how much better you could be. So I think that the tone has been appreciated. But also, I'm actually a lot more optimistic than many of the French themselves. And so for a foreigner to come in and say, hey guys, it's not as bad as you think, people look at me and say, well, really? Tell us. So I've had a lot of reaction, and I've had letters, and I've been invited to lunches and dinners. So that's been very good.
Okay, let's spend a couple of words on French business. One of the things you say in your book is that French senior business people seem to understand very well what is the problem when you talk with them in private. But coming out of the private salon, they don't seem to dare say what's wrong and what needs to be done. Are French business people too afraid to tell the truth? What's the problem?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that seems to be changing is exactly that. That my sense is that the French business community has been very reticent to take a stand on politics and on what needs to be done. And they, in their own companies, are doing what needs to be done. They see the problems in the country, but they are nervous because it goes back to my first point about the debate in this country is too claustrophobic, and they get pigeonholed too quickly, and the reaction is too predictable and too ideological. But my sense is that I think with this election campaign it's starting to change a bit, which is good.
Well, it must be now, 6 months or so since you finished the book? Or,
yeah, well, it's 4 months since it was published. Yes.
Yeah, but
so yes, 6 months since. Yes.
Okay. During this time, has anything changed?
Well, that's been the most important change. The growing awareness of the importance of getting the economy right. If you look at a report I quote in the book quite a lot is the report on the state of the national debt, which is written by a banker, Michel Pibel. And the issue of how much policies cost is now the big issue in this election campaign. So something has happened there. It's the first time that the issue of money has played such a central role in a French election campaign. So that's good. The other thing is the business community itself, the MEDEF, is taking a much more active stance. They've written a book, the Laurence Parisot has written a book called actually The Need for Air, the Besoin d'Air, so picking up one of my themes about opening the windows. And that's selling well. So again, it seems to me, looking at the election campaign, there is what the French would call a prise de conscience, that they're starting to get the idea that it's important to get the economy right. So that's good.
Okay, we have one question left, Peter, which will not be about your book. So if you were not a journalist, what would you be doing?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I've tried lots of things before I became a journalist. And since I've been a journalist, I've even moved, as you said, into a management role. I so much love writing that whatever I would do, I would want to have some sort of writing element. But I also like the good life. And what you do, with wine, I think that would be a really fun thing to move into. With tourism, I think that would be an interesting area to move into. But would I want to become a lawyer or an investment banker or an insurance salesman? No, I can't give you quite such a specific answer. But certainly doing something which gives people pleasure in an area, especially in France, where there is so much that you can have that gives pleasure, would be fun.